SEC EDGAR is where every filing lives. It's the official record. It's where publicly traded companies submit all of their documents. It's free and it's not going anywhere. But the problem with EDGAR, especially if you open a 10K annual report, is that there's no reading layout at all. There's hundreds of pages of dense text. If you try to use your phone, it doesn't even resize, so you're pinching and zooming through the whole thing. Then if you try to copy a table into your model, the dollar signs come out in their own columns, and you spend the next 10 minutes cleaning that up. If you want to see what changed from one year to the next or one quarter to the next, you have to open both filings and read them side by side. If you want multiple years of segment data, that's multiple filings that you have to stitch together by hand. And then if you want to do growth rate, common size analysis, that's all on you to figure out how to do. And usually that means building a model and then calculating that all by yourself. Insider activity is the same story. Every trade is its own filing. So following one executive means opening dozens. And then if you find something worth keeping, there's nowhere to put it. There's no notes. There's no saved filings. And if you want to show someone what you found, you can only send the whole filing, not the passage you were reading and not the table you were looking at. Although some companies have solved for these problems by offering stock research platform tools that consolidate financial tables like the income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statement. Some even go further and calculate ratios and multiples for you. And others have created websites where you can see insider activity in a more readable format. None of them have really solved the problem of reading SEC filings in a more digestible format. You have to read SEC filings in order to get a solid understanding of a business. Every great investor knows that. So you cannot simply just rely on a financial data aggregator or a stock research platform or insider trading dashboard to give you a solid understanding of a business. At the end of the day, you have to read the filings. You have to read the footnote. You have to understand what has changed from year to year and from quarter to quarter to really be confident when investing in a business. If you're an analyst or investor, you have already been on the SEC EDGAR website at least 100 times. So instead of wasting your time highlighting all of these problems on SEC EDGAR, which I'm sure you're already very familiar with, instead I'm going to show you SECSift. And what it does is it turns SEC filings, that means any SEC filing, into a clean, readable document. You can search any word, you can export anything, you can merge tables, and you can optionally let AI highlight what matters and gray out the rest. You can also compare against previous filings. It has completely replaced EDGAR for me and a few equity research colleagues of mine. At the very minimum, it's a tool that you can use to replace how you read SEC filings. At the very best, it's a tool that will completely replace your entire research process. It's something that I've been using daily for all of my stock research write-ups, and I've been doing this for over a decade. So I'm going to walk you through exactly how you can get started. Let's use Toast. Type in Toast here. Click on Toast, and from there, you'll instantly get the company's most recent 10Q or 10K. Here you can see that we have different filters. So these are the primary filings that you would want to read for any particular company. By default, I have the 10K and 10Q enabled. You can also select the Form 4, for example, and that'll show here. You can also sort these filings by their dates and names. Another option is to click the Show Every Filing. If you turn that on, then it'll show all of the other miscellaneous filings that you may want to look at or read, but most of the important filings are already provided in this list here. Clicking on any filing like the 10Q that we have selected right now will open it up in a more readable format. This is not only more readable, but is also a lot more digestible. This is also something that you can open on your phone and read through for free. Tables are in a clean format. You can copy the data directly from the tables. If you have a paid account, you can export the data as a CSV or into Excel. So here's an example of the Excel. You can see that the data is perfectly clean, and then this link directs you back to the same filing here. You can also copy a table link and share with anyone. Once they open that link, they'll be directed to this exact table, so they'll know exactly what you're looking at. But another feature is the ability to do common size and growth analysis on any financial table. If you're reading an income statement, balance sheet, or cash flow statement, you want to know how much costs make up revenue revenue or how much debt makes up of the company's total liabilities and equity, for example, or you want to see how much revenue has grown from one period to the next. Usually that would mean copying that data into an Excel model and then performing that calculation. You can just do it here without leaving the page, and it's completely free. So you just click common size and it'll show each of these items as a percent of total assets, which is the standard convention. You can also change it and rebase it. So you can do it as a percent of total non-current assets if you wanted to do that. Another option is to show the growth. So it's showing the percentage change from the previous quarter to the current quarter. If you're like me, maybe you prefer having the period order as oldest first. You just select that in this drop down here and it'll change that for you. You can also change how the values are formatted. If you hover over this, it'll tell you that it's filed in millions, but you can change that if you like to billions or thousands. You can also wrap the tables. To understand that better, look at this table under item 2. You can see that in the header of the table, the names are a bit long. So this is where the wrap wide tables would be helpful. You could just wrap that and then it'll be in a much easier format to read. Another feature is the ability to analyze a table. So this is another paid feature. This uses AI and it reads the relevant section as well as the table so that it has context on not just a table, but its surrounding context, and then it gives you an output based on that context and the guidelines I've set to give you a quick analysis without you having to read through the table. So this basically gives you a brief analysis of the company's balance sheet, and this will give you an indication of where to look next in the filing versus just a static table where you have to not only know finance, but also know how to read every single line item and the interconnections between them. Now on the sidebar, what's also available are the table of contents. So these table of contents populate for every single relevant filing. Some of the filings are particularly long. You can hide the subsections, just makes it a little bit less condensed. Sift labels is something I'll get into a little bit later. The next feature is the tables. So instead of navigating the filing by just a simple table of contents, you can also just look at the tables itself. So you might have seen this little AI tag on some of the tables, and that is because many tables don't really have a proper title. And so that's why I have this paid feature. And so these names here, like for table 13, other current assets, this table here was named from AI. So it read the table, it read the surrounding context, and then it labeled that table accordingly. That also works for exhibits. For example, if you look at Alibaba, all of these exhibits, Alibaba does not name, but I name it for you using AI and a vision model. Anyways, you might have noticed that while I was running through that, the filings that we were working with have not just disappeared. The filings that were previously open have opened up in tabs. So you can have up to 10 tabs opened and they work just like browser tabs. There's a library tab here. I have some existing folders and companies saved here, but what you have here are the recent filings that you have opened, and you can save any one of them and then drag it into a folder, create a folder, name it something, keep everything you've read organized in one place. Another feature that I want to show you is the search function. So let's look at Microsoft. Looking at their 10K annual report, which is just over 100 pages long. You can try to navigate the entire thing using the table of contents and the tables. Or what you can do is you can do Control F or just click on the search filing button. This is an advanced search function that makes it a lot more useful than just doing Control F on EDGAR. There's a few options here. The first one is to match word variations. This makes it so that you don't miss a term when you search for something like increase. It's also finding increasing and it's finding increased. That just ensures that you're not missing any important keywords. You can also search by whole word, and if you search for something like rate, then it'll search for words that only include rate, not terms like corporate, which has a word rate in it. You can also do match case, and typing gap for generally accepted accounting principles will return only those that are in uppercase, not those that are in lowercase. You can also search tables only. Searching for revenue, for example, you'll find only where revenue has been mentioned in the tables itself, and this ignores everything outside of the tables. Another feature we'll get into a bit later is the ability to skip the routine text. Routine text is what Sift, the main AI analysis feature for this product, uses to identify sections that are legal speak or sections that are not really required for you to read the filing in order to understand the business. So on that note, we should jump into the SIFT analysis. The SIFT is what makes the entire filing significantly easier to read. It goes through the filing section by section. It flags the lines that matter. It fades out the routine legal text, so the most useful content stands out. It'll tell you what to read, what to skip, what to skim. So those are labeled on the right sidebar here. It'll tell you once it's done generating, and you can also hide or show those SIFT labels on the table of contents here as well, which is what that checkbox is for. But now if you look at the right sidebar, each of these SIFT analyses costs anywhere between 3 credits to 10 credits, determined by how dense the filing is. So a smaller filing costs only 3 credits and a more dense filing costs 10 credits. If you choose one of these smarter models, it'll multiply that cost by 10x or 30x, which is helpful if you're really doing a deep analysis on a company. For each section here, what AI does is it gives a short read, plain English summary with a quick verdict on whether this section is worth your time. This is what lets you skim a 200-page filing and still land on the few pages that matter, and also be able to identify the information that most analysts completely miss. And the neat thing is that you can collapse sections AI considers to be skippable from this right sidebar here by just clicking this checkbox here. You can also completely hide it from the filing. If you click on this collapse skip sections button and then toggle it on, it'll completely hide that from the filing itself, which makes the filing a lot more easier to scan, and you can unhide it anytime. Also, if you disagree with the AI on a labeling, you can always change it. So you can change it from a read, skim, or skip to one of the other ones, and it'll no longer, in the case of skip, hide it from the filing. Moving on to the flags, these are pretty straightforward. Positive, the green means that something is good or better than before. The notable or amber color means that it is something that is probably worth knowing, that is neither particularly good or bad on its own. And then concern, red, is something that could be a problem and is worth a closer look. So it flags those section by section. And then if you click on any of the flags here, it'll highlight the exact passage from the filing and give you a 1-sentence answer on the positive, notable, or concerning language. And at any time, you can change this flag if you like. So for this one, the AI marked this as notable, but you may think that that is a negative sign because of burn, for example, and then you label that as a concern, and that would be updated here accordingly. Or you could just say that's not really a flag at all, and that would be removed from the section analysis. And that's useful when we get to the exporting, because you can export this entire thing marked up, which is helpful to sharing with your team or someone else online. You can always undo your changes as well. So if I wanted to get a quick read of a company, I would uncheck skip, maybe even skim, and then I would read through all of these, look at the ones that are most notable to you, read the surrounding sections if you want a deeper understanding. That is how the flags work, and you can turn any of them off or on. So maybe you just wanted to focus on the concerning flags, you can do that by just having that one enabled and focus just on the negatives for this company, like where the company mentions that expects content and service revenue dropped 5%. Now, on that note, you may want to know more about this Xbox content and service revenue decrease to 5%. So that's where this chatbot comes into play. And this chatbot has context of the entire filing. Using this chatbot costs about 3 credits per message. You can ask this chatbot anything about this filing. You could just ask it about why did Xbox content and service revenue drop. It generates the answer and it tells you exactly why without you having to read the entire filing yourself. You could also skip this chatbot and use the Ask AI. So if you highlight any section, you can use the Ask AI functionality. And there are 3 default questions here. You can explain it in plain English. You can ask it why it matters, what are the key numbers, or you can also customize your own AI voice and create your own default questions here. Once you save those questions and your specific prompt, then it'll show up as one of the 3 options here, which will save you a lot of time, especially if there's something you ask pretty often. So if you ask why did this matter and you select that section, it'll read the passage passage and it'll read the surrounding context and it'll give you an answer on why that matters. This answer will be a lot less helpful than the answer that is in the AI chatbot because it has context of the entire filing. But in either case, you can save the answer as a note. Notes are in the other tab. They're also accessible by clicking on this button here. This will let you jump to any note by just clicking on it. Maybe you have an Xbox tag. You can create a tag, save it. Then you can filter by the tags, or you can select all these notes and tag them as Xbox or remove the tag Xbox. And so you can save AI answers as notes. You can also highlight anything yourself and create a note, tag it if you want, save it as a note, and it'll save on the right sidebar. For these AI answers, you can also save these answers as a note. Then you can tag it here. The note feature is integrated throughout the entire filing. If you no longer want to see a note, you can resolve it. It'll go into the resolve tag, or you can just completely delete it altogether and it'll be removed permanently. You can also browse notes from other filings. So here is one that I wrote on J&J. Click on that and you'll be directed to that note that you made from a completely different company. So the neat thing is that you can look at notes from other filings without having to leave your current filing. The last thing I want to mention about notes is that you can search your notes and you can link any note you like. Previously, I showed you that you can link tables and share that with anyone, but you can also link the notes to, and you can share that with anyone online. And if they have an account, they'll be able to save that note to their own account. You can also highlight something, copy it as a link, then share that with anyone. Anyone who opens that link will be directed to this exact passage here. That just makes it a lot easier to share something specific from a filing. So that is how you use the note feature. Now, going back to the SIFT analysis, what you can also do here is flag sections yourself. So one thing we haven't gotten into yet is the routine text. You may want to highlight this as routine. You'll see that it grays out. And you can also undo that if you like. But by doing this, you're saying that this is not particularly important to focus on. If you go back to the top of the page, you can see that the routine text has already been fading sections that are not particularly important to a reader. There are various levels of sensitivity. There's low if you want to be more careful with what is being filtered out. There's medium and there's high, which is the most aggressive. Showing routine text will just make it look like normal. You can fade it and that'll make it easier to glance over, or you can just hide it altogether, just like the skip section feature, and it'll collapse that from the filing and make the filing a lot more easier to scan. And just like the collapsed skip sections, you can unhide any routine text anytime because nothing is ever permanently deleted. You can see that it does its job because it is hiding stuff that is not really necessary for you to read through. Like this section here, it is graying out this note about forward-looking statements. This is just telling the readers that this report includes estimates, projections, and whatnot related to the company's business plan. That much is obvious to anyone who has read a filing before, and this is mostly just legal speak that you can completely ignore. So that is why I typically just hide the routine text. I put it on a more aggressive setting, and that usually does a job. For paragraphs where there might be some routine text within it, it doesn't hide those sections because that would remove the other potentially important information. For example, here Microsoft is saying that its goal is to lead the industry in several distinct areas of technology over the long term. That is mostly just generic and filler talk that you can completely ignore when researching a company. So that is why it's grayed out. While topics on Microsoft Cloud are not, and what the company is investing resources into are also not. The next feature is the comparison. The comparison marks exactly what is new, what changed, and what was removed since an earlier filing. This is a free feature that you can use if you have an account, and you do not need to run Sift for this to work. If you run Sift, it'll highlight the most important ones and then create these tags so you can jump through on the filing itself. But if you just want to read through the entire filing without having AI identify the most important new, changed, or removed sections, then you can just run the comparison feature without having run Sift. So there's two views here. The first one is Redline. Redline highlights the new, changed, and removed parts in color inside the document. So this is best for reading what has moved. And just like the positive, notable, and concern tags, which I'll turn off for now, you can show or hide any of these. And here is where you can change the comparison. So here we're comparing one annual report to the previous one. So fiscal year 2026 to fiscal year 2025. The other option is black line. As you can see, once I click that, it faded out everything else that stayed the same. So that just makes it easier to identify the changes that actually stand out, specifically the new, changed, and removed parts. So if you run Sift and you have the comparison on, you'll see these tags below. And just like the flags, you can jump to those and it'll show the exact specific sections that have changed. It'll also show you what the company has removed. So that's in gray. And again, you can collapse the skip section by just checking that and focus on the sections that are most likely the most important to read. You can also just ignore this AI analysis, turn off Sift and then read through the entire filing. Maybe you only want to see what is new in the filing. So I would just do new and then you can see that pretty easily. So that is how the comparison feature works. And this is particularly helpful if you are someone who's invested in a company for multiple quarters or multiple years. You have a pretty solid understanding of the business already. So you don't need to read the entire filing. You just need to look at what's changed. So that is how Sift works. And going back to the search function, remember I mentioned that you can skip the routine text. If the routine text is enabled, then you can select this option and then anything that is in routine text. So maybe something like the effective tax rate. If you had that enabled, then it's only going to find topics of the effective tax rate that are not routine. If you have that disabled, then it'll show those as well. So now it's highlighting that routine text when maybe you don't want to look through that at all. Now let's talk exporting. So in terms of exporting, there's a few options that you can do. The first is to question whether you even need to export anything at all, because what you can do is link the entire filing and then you can share that with anyone, even if they don't have an account, and it'll open up this filing. If they do have an account, then it'll also show all of the markups that you did using Sift or the comparison. But maybe you also just want to export the data out of the filing. Doing that with SEC EDGAR on its own is pretty difficult, but with this tool, you can just download it, CSV or Excel like I showed before, or you can click on the similar tables button here. Companies file the same statements every quarter and every year, and what similar tables does is it finds that same table in the company's previous filings and lets you browse or merge them without you having to navigate through every single filing yourself and then try to consolidate the different line items that a company may change or rename from one year to the next or from one quarter to the next. So this feature just does that all for you. So there's two tabs here, there's browse and there's merge tables. In this case, for this income statement table here, it's going back to fiscal year 2021. You unselect any of these and decide what to keep in the export as one file or as separate files. I'll do separate to show you how that works, and it'll build it in a zip file. Once you extract that folder, there's 3 files here and you can open up any one of them. It'll come out with perfect formatting that you can start using in your model. There's always a source link at the bottom that links back directly to that table so that you're not at a loss of where that data came from. You can also export it as one file. That will just show fiscal year 2026, 25, and 24 as separate tabs. And that may be more useful for your modeling cases than having it all separate. For both a browse and the merge tables, we have some options at the top here. So you can show it as filed, newest, or oldest, depending on how you want to export that data on both of the tabs. You can also decide what to include in the columns. So these are all disabled because they're not really relevant for this particular table. For the merge tables, we have another option, which is to remove the duplicate periods. Because if you're merging an income statement table, for example, there's going to be repetitive years. And in that case, you don't need to repeat 1 year twice, especially if it's the same exact data. If you check on this, it'll remove the duplicate periods from the table. You can also select anything yourself manually and it'll be left out of the export. For example, maybe you don't need these labels here like cost of revenue and revenue, earnings per share, shares outstanding. You just select that. It will not be included in the export. And then let's just say we're going to merge those same 3 tables, download it as an Excel file. It merges instantly and then it is exported in a perfect format. And you can see that everything we said not to export was not exported. And everything here is data that you can trust because it comes directly from SEC EDGAR. You can also merge tables for ones that have a bit more messier data. So this one is on the company's debt. and maybe you'll only want to look at the ones that have dated periods. So maybe you just want to look at the debt amounts for these last 2 fiscal years and ignore all of these years and rates. Then you could just do that and export that. So that's the merge table feature. You can also export every single table from the filing itself. So click on the export filing button, go to tables. It'll list out all of the tables from the filing. Then you can export that as a CSV or Excel, one file or separate filings. Select the ones you want to export and export it. If the company has any exhibits or images, you can export those all at once as well. The other feature, which is useful for putting into your own AI models or just sharing in the most simplest format, is Markdown. The neat thing about the Markdown and the PDF export is that it'll follow your exact markup that you did on the filing itself. That means if you faded routine text, it'll fade that on the export. If you have comparison stuff flagged, then it'll flag exactly that on the export, and same for the flags themselves, and same for the stuff that you have marked as skip. And if you have notes, like we have a couple notes here on Xbox, it'll export those notes as well. If you don't want any of this included, you would just customize what exactly you want excluded or included on the Sift tab. So you can export as a markdown. Then this is the entire markdown of the Microsoft filing from top to bottom, nothing excluded. Things that are changed are labeled appropriately, and you can work with this data however you like. You can also export this as a PDF and include your notes as PDF annotations. It'll take a few seconds to build the PDF. Once it builds, you would just open the filing on any PDF reader. It'll show you that entire filing with all of your markups included, however you configured it. So that is how you can use SECSift to completely revamp your research process when it comes to reading SEC filings. And I didn't even get into some of the other features, which is, for example, looking at the Form 4s, which have different structures. So for Form 4s, it is provided in a much more cleaner format. It also provides that executives past insider trade history, and the Sift here is based on a different set of instructions. So the analysis it does tells you exactly what you need to know about the insider trade, and you can click on any of these insider trade histories to view it. Those are the main benefits of using SECSift over SEC EDGAR and competing tools, which even at our highest monthly cost plan is less than half of the competing tools. And I would argue we have a lot more useful features than them for reading SEC filings. You can start for free, get 100 credits if you just want to run the AI analysis features. And then you can either subscribe to a plan if you're using credits often or want more storage space for the filings and folders and notes, or you can stay on a free plan and just top up on credits anytime. That's a one-time purchase, and those credits last forever. On an annual plan, the most expensive tier is not even a third of the cost of what our most similar competitors are offering. If you have any questions or feedback or suggestions on the tool, feel free to let me know.